Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and since I'm getting my new PC parts today, I decided I would do a slightly more simple video because I need to be able to step away and be able to sign for my package, as well as I think it might take me a little while to make sure my computer is running properly once I replace most of the parts. So we're just going to do something that's technically not really related, but I use Risk of Rain music a lot on my channel. Then I made it pretty obvious that I really like Risk of Rain, so we're going to do a Risk of Rain Survivor tier list, just because this is going to be simple, it's going to be quick, and it'll give me no pressure to make sure I take my time when putting my computer back together. So this includes everyone up to Survivors of the Storm, or Seekers of the Storm, and this is going to be sort of on a few criteria: how strong they are, how fun I think they are to play, and overall strength, like just looking at it objectively. That's sort of what's going to dictate it. So starting up with Commando. So Commando is pretty true to his name, or his description. He's the jack of all trades. I find him somewhat fun to play. I quite like his R that gives him the rapid fire pistols, mainly just because if you stack attack speed, it just becomes this insane bullet hose that's like impossible to control, which is really fun. But I think we're going to put this guy in B tier. Commando, he's not super strong, he's not super weak. His ult skills are either better than his basic or they're pretty bad. Like, I don't really think grenades are very good. They're far too precise for how little damage they do. And overall, he's not the strongest, or he's not the weakest, in my opinion. Next up, we have Captain, who was a personal favorite of mine for a long time, though as I've gotten better at the game and I've gotten the mastery skins on everybody, I have become less fond of Captain. I find him to be quite static to play. He's very dependent on, obviously, his airstrikes, orbital strikes. His hacking beacons can be pretty useful. And while Diablo Strike is pretty funny, it's a little obtuse to use, which makes it, again, it's very unengaging to play with. But I'd say he's similar to Cat. He's definitely better than Commando, but not by much. He does have some interesting tech, like his infinite attack speed shotgun if you're using his beacons properly, but that is pretty easy to mess up and is very dependent on where the boss is or what you're fighting is, where they are on the map, because if you mess up with your mouse one beacon, you can't use that tech anymore. He also just lacks any movement, which makes him very slow and means that his runs are very feast or famine, because if you run into Wandering Vagrant on stage 1, chances are you're just going to die to his shockwave, because you just don't have the mobility to get away unless you're constantly hugging walls. But since he has a shotgun, he really needs to be up close. But I don't think he's too bad. Next up, we have Railgunner. Definitely one of, in my opinion, the stronger survivors in the game. She's decently mobile with her concussion mines and her knockback that's innate on her mouse ones. I quite like her gameplay. It's very rhythmic. It reminds me a lot of almost Gears of War with the reload system functioning very similar to that. And she's very solid. Evidently, she doesn't suffer from damage fall off, so she doesn't have to be in the thick of the fight. Her huge overcharged shots just do so much damage that with just one crowbar, you can be nearly one-hitting most bosses. With freeze shot, you can execute any of the bosses, if I'm not mistaken. Though I will say that probably against the False Sun, she definitely struggles just because that boss is so fast. He can pretty handily step out of her field of view, which then removes most of her threat because she can get a little tunnel vision when she's down scope. But I definitely put her towards the upper end of A tier. The only reason I'm not putting her in S is I think there's a survivor that just does what she does but better with very similar levels of mobility and more bulk. So next up, we definitely have one of the best survivors in the game in the Void Fiend. The Void Fiend has one of the best mouse ones in the game. It's infinite range. It has essentially aim assist that lets you just plink at enemies at super far ranges, and it will always hit. It slows enemies down, which is useful for your teammates and yourself. He has health. He heals himself basically for free, which makes him an absolute beast in the Void Fields, which the Void Fields are the most overpowered thing in the game. If you just beat stage 1 with one bungus, and you don't even need a bungus for using this guy, then you just go through the Void Fields, and have 9 extra items, you will just dominate the entire run usually, unless you get really bad luck. And this guy does the void fields perfectly. His mouse 1 gives him the long range he needs to poke any flyers. His mouse 2, his like void bomb, if you will, is super powerful. Uncharged does 600 damage, or 600% damage, so it procs bans. Charged up does 1100%, which is a huge damage. And then, of course, this isn't even talking... Oh, I guess there's one more skill. His, whoops. Let me make sure that's not the delivery man. His shift, which allows him to not only get rid of debuffs, which makes him very useful against void enemies, so he can't get collapsed. It allows him to negate most fall damage. And then, of course, once you give into void corruption completely, you get a 2,000% damage per second beam that just does so much damage. It stacks super well with attack speed. His mouse 2 becomes you don't have to charge it to get the max damage. His dash is super useful. I will say that his R when he's transformed isn't very useful because it hurts him, and you generally don't want to do that in this game. But that's a small price to pay. Definitely one of the best survivors in the game. Next up, we have Bandit. So Bandit is not a particular favorite of mine. I remember not really enjoying getting his Mastery skin when I got it. I will say he does make very good use of Purity because he gets guaranteed crits and, guaranteed bleed, I believe, if you're using his throwing daggers. And with Purity, he has Flight. You can just keep using his Smoke Bomb to fly through the air if you get, I think it's 3 Purities. Which is certainly fun because then you can just, use that to bounce around. Use his revolver is pretty fun, but he's definitely not a favorite of mine. He can feel very repetitive to play as. You basically just invisible, get behind, shoot, or stack your Desperados with your revolver, and then one-hit the boss, which is certainly a fun feeling, and can make Mithrix Stage 4 just hilariously easy by, you just hide behind a pillar, and then on the first frame of him being able to take damage, you just whip out the revolver and hit him for 10,000% damage, just because of how crazy that is. He's definitely pretty strong. He's not my favorite to play, but it's not like some survivors where I really hate playing them. I think he's definitely like an A-tier survivor. And we were talking about a unit that a hero that just does what Railgunner does, but better, and we have reached that survivor, and it is Mult-i. I'm not even going to beat around the bush. Mult-i, I'm not engineer. Mult-i is the best survivor in the game, in my opinion. The reason I say that is he has the most amount of builds, and in general, he's just really solid. He's a little slow movement speed-wise, but everything else is great. He's got the most health in the game, the most armor innately. There may be, the False Sun might change that up, but I don't have his stats memorized yet. But if we look at Mult-i, he has 3 main builds I'd say are really good. Rebar Retool, which is probably just the best thing in the game, because rebar hits so insanely hard, and then you just get to fire that like twice a second, which completely negates its downside and basically out-damages anything else in the game. So he's probably, in my opinion, the loader probably is better in single burst, but in sustained burst damage, he's the best. In sustained ranged firepower, power mode nail guns is crazy for stacking. Oh, hold on. Wait. Sorry. That's just some dumb advertisement. His power mode nail guns are fantastic. You get slightly reduced proc chance on each, but you've got 2 of them, so they just make short work of anything with just a little bit of bleed. You will be turning bosses into mincemeat, and it's very good at dealing with the basic enemies of a stage, though it does, of course, restrict your movement. And then one of my personal favorites is Saw mode. So power mode with saws is really powerful. Saw, they have that 1,000 damage per second, or 2,000 in power mode, and they attack 10 times per second with a 1 proc chance. So that should tell you all you need to know. Of course, it does come with the downside of he will struggle to hit things that are flying, but once he gets onto something, he basically gets like a magnet effect where he can just stay grinding on something. And if you haven't used Saw mode on Mult-i, I can only recommend it like an infinite amount. It is so fun. He can just do so much damage. If you get like 1 AP round and 1 focus crystal, you will just be turning bosses into like pulp in seconds. It's so satisfying. Regardless, I think Mult-i's the best survivor in the game. He's just so strong. He's so flexible. Scrap rocket launcher isn't very good, but one mediocre skill out of a bunch of good ones. I didn't even mention his mouse 2 is really solid for dealing with hordes. It's a good get out of jail free thing, and then the car form, boost mode. It gives him extra armor to negate fall damage, and in general, it's just useful to get around the map. It can also stun larger enemies. It procs bans if you're running one of his sustained builds. And his power mode gives him extra armor, and it allows him to use both his weapons. And then a retool lets you carry 2 equipments, and also Serpent just bypass the cooldown on rebar, which makes him just insanely powerful. He was one of the easiest and most fun mastery skins that I got. He is almost like foolproof to use. He's great. Next up, we have Engineer. Now, Engineer is the do nothing class, really. The AFK gamer build. His turrets can do, solid enough damage, though it's nothing too crazy. With the right items, obviously, they can be very powerful. Getting a Lysate Saw really changes things. He does kind of have the problem of his skills are a little lopsided. Thermal Harpoons is better than Bubble Shield. Spider Mines are better than regular mines, and I like using mobile turrets, but standard turrets are just much better. They do a lot more damage, and they benefit really well from Bungus, of course. That is one of the greatest things, is you get Bustling Fungus, get a few stacks of that. Your turrets will basically be invincible. And especially if you get something like Dio's Best Friend, because as long as you don't spend your Dios, your sentry guns will get second lives, basically forever. It's really fantastic. That also applies to Pluripotent Larva and so on. He does make good use of just about every item in the game. He likes crit chance, he likes attack speed, he likes bleed, he likes healing items like Bungus. Of course, Engineer himself isn't particularly standout. He's very slow. His mouse 1 is awful. It really is. But that does mean there is a point to be made that he's quite good with the Heretic mouse 1, because that turns him into an actual threat at range himself, and it doesn't really hurt his turret's DPS. I might need to do a run with that soon. Speaking of, the Heretic isn't here, but I'd say she's definitely up there with A or lower S tier in my opinion. Overall, Engineer, I think, is probably at the top of B tier. His turrets can be really strong, but he himself is just so flimsy that it's not great. Oh my god, Artificer. So, I absolutely detest Artificer. I know she's really powerful, and she's basically unkillable using her big ball. She's above most enemies. They can't hurt her. She cheeses Mithrix, almost no problem. She can also execute Mithrix like the Railgunner can. But oh my god, Artificer is just so boring to play. It's basically you just use your ball to jump in the air, you float, and then you just press mouse 1, and you just keep floating and pressing mouse 1. There's no interaction, there's no dodging, there's really no movement in her gameplay. You basically just float 30 million feet above all your enemies and shoot at them. It's so boring. But I know that with her ice wall, with her fire bolts, with all that, she is very powerful, so I won't put her in C tier. But dear God, I cannot put her higher than this. It's like pulling teeth to play Artificer. She's awful. I hate playing Artificer. If we're going personal opinion, D tier. And you know what? I'm leaving her down there. I know that I can't, that's not true, but she is so boring to play, she's going in D tier. On a much more positive note, Mercenary. I quite like Mercenary. He is pretty fun. I like his skills. I like all of them. I quite like his spin move. I like his dash forward to slash all the enemies he passes through. His mouse 1 is just, in general, pretty fun. He makes good use of a lot of different items. Definitely more slanted, in my opinion, towards multi-target damage. So Gasoline, Will-o'-the-Wisp, things like that. But I think he's very fun. He's very easy to skip pillars with, so that's always a nice benefit. And overall, I think he's just in general quite solid. He gets a free double jump, which means he basically just doesn't deal with fall damage, because you just jump before you hit the ground. Which does mean he's not quite as, Hopos isn't quite as useful for him, but I mean, hey, having multiple jumps is always good. In my opinion, Mercenary definitely up here with like Bandit and Railgunner. Very powerful. He can snowball into an unkillable run very quickly. He was the first person I got the False Sun skin with by defeating him on Prime Meridian. And the thing is, he can just become like, as I mentioned, like so powerful. I guess I was using the forbidden technique of Forgive Me Please, Gesture of the Drowned, and Chronic Expansion. But, I mean, hey, it's in the game, right? I love that build, by the way. It's just so ridiculously overpowered. It's hilarious. Next up, we have Rex. I actually quite like Rex. He's one of the survivors that can stay in the fight the longest, just because he's constantly healing himself off of his damage. His Flower Bud is really useful. It can negate basically anything that's very annoying to hit. Okay, I know I'm slightly distracted, but I'm just making sure my things are out for delivery, but they're not here yet. I should be able to just focus on the video and not worry about that anymore. The reason I am is because yesterday I missed their message by like 3 minutes, and I had to wait until today to get my parts. That's why I'm so uppity about it. Rex. So, Seed Bombardment is very solid damage. His Flower Bud that stops things from moving is very useful and also gives him a ton of lifesteal. His normal attack is nothing special, but it's not bad. It allows him to, again, lifesteal. He's really good with Death Mark just because he has an innate debuff, which is the main thing you're looking for in that. And his Force Push is useful not only for mobility, but as a get out of jail free card for the most part if you're about to get jumped by like Jerboas or something like that. Very useful. And overall, I quite like Rex. He is very slow, like movement speed wise, but that's generally something I can deal with if the character itself is fun to play. And Rex, I really think is. I really enjoy his basically not having cooldowns on his two main abilities, but they take his health and then he gets to heal from the damage they deal. It just allows him to be constantly in the fight. It's not like, say you hit a huge attack and then you have to run and wait till it's on cooldown again. I think Rex is very solid, definitely in this A tier. Not quite as strong as Railgunner, but I think he definitely deserves to be probably around here. Just because I think Rex is a little more fun to play than Bandit. Next up, we have Loader. Now, Loader is like Speedrunner's best friend, obviously. Grapple Hook, or Grapple Fist is super useful. Get a couple backup mags. You have a free Pillar Skip, which is definitely useful. I will say she's not the most engaging to play, but she is fun to play, just because you can hit those huge collateral punches dealing, 10,000% damage or whatever it is at max charge. She makes great use of a good amount of items, mainly the movement items, really, not even the burst damage items. Obviously, Crowbar is very good, but things like Wax Quails are just insane on her. Charge it up, press space, and just let go before the Wax Quail finishes moving, and you will be at max speed. And that's generally pretty fun. I will say she can be a little bit like top heavy, where she's either dominating or she dies really quickly. And she can definitely struggle against hordes if they're not like a type of unit that just walks in a straight line. And it can lead to points where she just kind of has to train them all together and then hope to God that she punches through all of them before she gets killed, which does help. She has a lot of bulk. She's one of the bulkier survivors in the game. Her mouse 1 is fairly standard. The scrap punch, the scrap armor ability is pretty useful. Obviously negates fall damage, which makes it really good on Eclipse if you're playing that, because you're a masochist. Her mouse 1 I think is pretty fun. I do occasionally like to just go pure attack speed and just build like the fact like the Star Platinum build where you just punch at rapid pace and constantly build shield, which makes her really hard to kill. And she's definitely up here with some of my other favorites to play. I don't think she's quite as strong, because the thing is, Mult-i does what she does, but at range, and Void Fiend does what she does, but also has range damage, which is why I think she probably ends up above Rex, but near Mercenary and Railgunner. I think these three are sort of the top of A tier, and then these guys make up the bottom of A tier. Next up, we have Acrid. I prefer to call him a gorilla when I'm playing Acrid. I like to make monkey noises when I'm jumping around. Another great user of Purity, just because his cooldowns are so short. Another also great user of Death Mark, because poisoning from his spit and his disease, obviously. His mouse 1 is pretty solid, gives him lifesteal, procs bans on the third hit, which is always good. He's super mobile, obviously, because of his jumps. If you get a few charges of jumps, or you just use Purity to get reduced cooldowns, you can literally just frog around the map at insane speeds, and it feels so good to play Acrid. He's definitely one of my favorites. I do think that Acrid kind of needs a good amount of luck to deal with anything. There is the whole meme where Acrid can kill any enemy in 100 seconds if he just uses Disease 10 times, basically. Though I don't find that to be particularly viable outside of like just trying to do it. Disease is much better than Blight, by the way, just so you know. But I do think he's quite fun to play, and that, in my eyes, gets him at least A tier. He's fun to play with the right items. He is pretty item dependent. He doesn't gain too much from things like backup mags. He really just he depends a lot on movement to get things done. And Purity is, like, in my opinion, a must run on him. It gives him basically full auto on his mouse to spit, or bite, I guess, if you're using that. And in general, that's the main thing. I think Acrid's fun. He's very solid as a survivor, though I don't think he's anything too insane. Next up, we have Huntress. No, I don't really enjoy playing Huntress, but it's not like Artificer, who I just hate playing that character so much. Huntress is just kind of boring because the game basically plays itself. It very much is the noob character. If you can't aim and move, play Huntress, because then she does the aiming for you. Her glaives do the bouncing for you. You occasionally have to aim if you're using Ballista, but she's really strong. I can't deny it. She's a great carry pick. She deals with hordes really well. She does decent single target with things like her glaives or Ballista. And I think she's solid, but out of the 3 top tiers, she's easily the most boring, no doubt. Next up, we have, what is it, Sojourn? I think is what her name is. I sort of forgot her name. I haven't played her in a while. She is, in my opinion, similar to some of like the B tiers, where she's kind of fun to play. But she's definitely... Her damage isn't too bad with her punches and the big fist. It's not too bad. Of course, she has the ability to revive a teammate on her 7th. Remember, if you're playing with teammates, do 6 of your meditates, which is a fun little rhythm game. Or not rhythm, like almost DDR, I guess. Do 6 of those and wait for the 7th until somebody dies. Her fireball form is pretty fun. It synergizes well with Ignition Tank, obviously. And she's got decent mobility. Decent damage, and she's got a unique ability, but I don't think she's super strong. Aside from that, I'll probably put her in B tier. She's not a hero. She's not a survivor I think of often, but I don't think there's really anything inherently wrong with her. She's not boring, but she's just not the most engaging to play. Though I do like the game of her rhythm thing. The False Sun. So I'm probably in the minority here where I say I really enjoy playing False Sun. A friend of mine, a lot of the reviews I've seen say he's very clunky, which, I mean, I guess so. But I just like playing him. I like his dashes, I like his spikes, I like the mechanic of his growth, and his beam is like my favorite ability in the game. I really enjoy him. Though I don't think he's terribly strong, unfortunately, which definitely hinders him, but he is very fun, in my opinion. With a lot of attack speed, you'll be swinging that club like crazy, and the club slam can do a lot of damage, depending on if you have full spikes or... when you have full spikes, obviously you're tankier, but then once you shoot off all of his spikes, you'll be moving at like sonic speeds. It's honestly kind of crazy how fast he can move. And overall, I quite like the False Sun. He's definitely not strong enough to be an A tier, but I'm going to put him at the top of B tier. I think he's really fun. Next up we have Chef, who... Chef is fun in concept, but a little tough in execution. Makes good use of ignition tanks, obviously. The glaze mechanic is solid just to do extra damage. I think his healing needs to be made better because the pickup range isn't very large and the healing isn't very big either. And I feel like they should probably rework his mouse 1. Just because it feels a little obtuse. You throw it 3 times and then you're kind of out of luck. What I would do is maybe make it into more of a you throw it 3 times, and then you call them back, throw it 3 times, call them all back. I think that would be a lot more fun. And also would make it maybe a little bit more consistent. Maybe make it so when you do throw your utensils, when they're spinning in place, they deal damage over time to whatever's nearby. And then you call all 3 back, and you have the same boomerang effect. I think that would make him more fun. I quite like his rolling pin attack. He's almost there. He's just missing a couple things, but I'm probably going to put him right above Sojourn, just because I think he's a little more fun. Whereas, yeah, Sojourn's just not quite as interesting. So this is my tier list based on strength, how fun I think they are, and overall play style. B tier is the things that are fun, they're solid, right? They're not bad. D tier is just Artificer because she's so boring to play. I'm sorry, I don't know why someone would want to play her. She's so boring. And then S tier is the characters that are just the best in the game, and also for the most part fun. Void Fiend and Mult-i are my favorite survivors. Huntress less so, but I can admit that she's just too good to not acknowledge that. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time with probably more Warhammer content, unless you guys really, really like the Risk of Rain content. See ya!